most of the ones who are coming in have already come in, and then there might be some latecomers, but we have waited a little bit for them. So I'm just going to go ahead and start tonight's program. So good evening, actually, everybody, and welcome to the In Conversations with the Finnish Institute's online discussion. My name is Monica Gathuo. I welcome you all, and I'll be today your host-ish and the moderator for the conversation. So today is the fourth session of the In Conversations with the Finnish Institute's discussion series, and we will actually look today into the inner community organizing and the ways in which minorities or minoritized communities create, produce, and consume culture of their own. Our focus is the Sámi community or the Sámi communities. Let's talk about them as a plural because that is the fact. And how they work for their own benefit. Today we have Petra Laiti, who is a Sámi rights advocate and an advisor for the cultural grant programs at Nordic Culture Point. Welcome, Petra. And then we have Unnamari Puuska, a new guest for us, a little bit of a change for what we promised, but we're always welcome for new guests. She is the secretary of the culture unit at the Sámi Council. And of course, we have our very lovely Iiris Tarvonen from the Finnish-Norwegian Cultural Institute to present the Culture Institute hosting. So that will be Oslo tonight. So these culture and arts discussions have been running from October 2021, so about a good 6 months. And unfortunately, they'll be ending this spring, but we'll see what happens. Maybe there'll be something more. Just for a reminder for everyone attending, this session will be recorded and published to the Institute's own YouTube channel. And if you haven't seen the 3 previous ones, so this is the 4th one, you can go and check them from the Institute's own YouTube channels. And these would be the Finnish Institute of the UK, Benelux, and then the one in New York. So we're on the 4th installment of this 6-part discussions, and we will we'll continue in a great minute. This is of course, like a bigger discussion that we have had in the culture and arts fields for many years, and as the Institute wanted to take part in the discussions, so voila, here we are. I would actually want to invite Petra, Unnamari, and Iiris to just tell a little bit about themselves, just a sentence or two, and how they, for example, ended up in this field. Please, Petra, would you begin?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me. So my name is Petra Laiti. I am a 26-year-old Sámi rights advocate, and I currently live in Helsinki. Well, let me put it this way. Since I've done Sámi activism, Sámi rights activism for quite a few years, it's basically inevitable that you also start to dabble in cultural activities, because Indigenous rights are also about cultural rights, and Indigenous culture is political in many cases. So I've, in addition to doing rights activism, I've also dabbled in performance art and music, and other types of performing and public speaking. And I'm also a huge lover of Sámi cultural events. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about these themes and to dive into what I love, basically.
Fantastic. What about you, Unnamari? Could you let us know a little bit about you?
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me this online discussion. So my name is Unnamari Puuska, and I'm 30 years old, and I come from the southernmost Sámi village in Finnish side of Sámi. The village is called Vuotso, and in Sámi language it's Vuohju. And very briefly, I could tell you a little bit about my own background. I'm working as a cultural secretary of the Sámi Council, and I started working in Sámi Council almost 1 year ago. And I also have my own background as an artist in the field of music, because I have played in 2 different bands, and nowadays the music field is a little bit in a background in my life, but there it is still. But I'm looking forward to this evening, and I hope that we are going to have a good discussions.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. Please, Iiris, tell a little bit about yourself, but could you just briefly introduce a little bit about the Institute as well?
Yes, thank you, Monica. And thank you to both Petra and Unnamari for being here with us tonight. And I would also like to say thank you to all of you who are joining us and participating this discussion. So I work as a producer at the Finnish-Norwegian Cultural Institute. We are located in Oslo, but we work in the whole region of Norway. The Finnish Culture and Academic Institutes, we are a network. And our task is to represent and promote Finnish culture and arts abroad. And we do that in various ways. For example, we create international dialogue and networks. And maybe just a few words about my background. Before this post I have now, I worked within culture both in Norway and in Finland. And then I've also worked within the Nordic collaboration, or the official cooperation, both as a communication advisor and head of programs when it comes to communications. And I think here today, we as the Institute Network, we are interested in how to make sure that we can showcase the diversity of Finnish culture and arts when we work internationally, and that how we can support the minoritized communities, and in this context, the Sámi communities, when it has to do with fields of arts and culture.
Fantastic. Yes. Thank you so much for the brief introductions, and I really want to also thank all of you who have come tonight. I will be asking some questions. We're going to start with them in a little while, but I want to also invite you, our guests, to write some questions in, I don't know which side it is, the question, the chat bar, so that we have around 10 to 15 minutes in the end to also engage into your questions for our guests. And yes, let's get started, right? First of all, I want to really know about the kind of the culture and art creation for your own community. Like what do you consider first, and what do we talk about when we are creating something from the for us by us, so the FUBU concept of lens or place? Please go ahead, anyone of you, Unnamari or Petra.
If I go first, if that's okay, I think one of the most central ways in which Sámi create art and cultural events and happenings is through selecting the language that you are using when you make that concept or that event. For those of you who aren't aware, there are nine different Sámi languages. The one that's most widely used is the North Sámi language that is spoken by approximately 25,000 people. So it's not a huge language that either. It is endangered, but it is a big enough language that there are fully functional festivals and events and cultural centers that operate in that language. And so whenever something happens in the Sámi community in the arts or culture field, I always look first to, is this in any Sámi language? Is this in the Sámi language that I speak, or is this in another Sámi language that I either understand or I don't understand? Is this in a Scandinavian language or in Finnish, or is this in English? And that, to me at least, gives an indication of who this is meant for. And so if I think, okay, this is in a Sámi language, then I think it's for all Sámi. But if it is in a language that, in a Sámi language that I don't understand, then I view it as, okay, this is also for me, but it is particularly for the Sámi people who speak this language. So I can enjoy it, but it's for these people first and only second to me. And the same thing is, I do enjoy, for instance, Sámi music or what have you in Finnish or in English particularly. But it's a different kind of experience because it's open for everyone to interpret and to understand. So that, I think, is one of the most like obvious things that the Sámi community uses in order to direct culture towards the right types of audiences and the intended audiences.
What do you think about it, Unnamari, yourself, like also as a Sámi Council member and but also as an artist yourself? Where to start? What do you consider when you are making arts for your own community?
Well, of course, these are very wide questions. Only more questions are coming to my mind. And it's a little bit challenging to answer these questions like holistically, but I believe that there is no single right answer to these questions. But I'd like to think that this is an arena to create a good conversation and open up new perspectives. And in the Sápmi, in the Sámi land, an individual may have a sense of responsibility on their shoulders, that they should contribute to the fact that future generations also will have the opportunity to live in Sápmi as Sámi. So starting point can often be that an individual has a responsibility for the community, because everything you can do can affect your community. So I believe that many people think about the target group in their work, who it is aimed at. So this naturally affects the content. So making art within your community, for your community, can evoke different kinds of feelings. So it can be challenging and pressurizing and restrictive, because knowing everyone can be the limiting thing in so small community. But at the same time, it can evoke like pleasant feelings, because when we can do something in that Sámi for ourselves, so there will be no need to be explaining the basics and why I'm doing this and where is this coming from and so on. But at the same time, there is a debate and reflection in the field of Sámi arts as to whether I can do this, whether it's correct. And at the same time, it must be borne in mind that not all things don't belong to everyone, which raises the additional question of where the limit is and what belongs to the community and what is meant only for the community and what can be shown also outside.
Yes, definitely. And this kind of brings me into this kind of thought of like, what makes FUBU, so for us by us, really FUBU, and what separates it from the other. Like Petra was already saying that, you know, there's like all these options of like language wise choosing, or then like, but what really makes it for us by us, in a sense of like this kind of collective also creation.
And I think responsibility, as Unnamari lifted, is a really important theme. And I think oftentimes, I mean, language is just scratching the surface of it, really, because it even the choice to make something in a Sámi language comes from the responsibility and the will to develop that language and to make content in that language. This is particularly visible in the Sámi music field, where people make music in these languages that only a couple of hundred people speak because they want to, but also because they feel they need to, that this is their responsibility. And at the same time, even though the Sámi are one people across 4 nations, the historical trauma that has been that we've been subject to is very localized. So for instance, there's also this question of like who gets to make art and cultural content about which trauma and which historical event. And even within like the language groups themselves, those traumas and those backgrounds are not unified. So it really becomes this question of like layering and being really critical of yourself as well. As Unnamari said, am I allowed to make this type of content? Is this mine to make? Is this my thing to say? And oftentimes it's completely fine. But at the same time, like you are also, I mean, you have this sort of internalized like sense of respect towards those events as well, that I think Sámi are really careful about the details and the choices that they make when art is produced.
Yeah. And this also like brings me to the pond of like, because there is this maybe unspoken hierarchy of things that you have to like feel out the themes and the areas and the histories, like, and also what does it then mean to create and especially like criticize when we're getting into arts and culture where criticism is a vibrant part of culture and arts production. If we're already kind of needing to feel the field of where we are, who then becomes who gets the power to criticize, and are we ready for that criticism? Like yeah,
definitely.
What do you think, Unnamari, as an artist as well?
Sorry?
As an artist as well.
Well, about the criticizing or
criticizing or the previous.
Okay, well, if I talk about this criticizing, but yes, of course, I think that Sámi community is nowadays strong enough to do criticizing, and I think that it's also needed. And well, if we, for example, think Finnish society, so we know that Finnish people, of course, can criticize Finnish art. So of course, also Sámi people can do that, and maybe it's also something that needs to be done.
Yeah, and this has a lot to do with, I think, the fact that the past two or three younger generations that we have a completely new type of pride in Sámi culture, and the Sámi culture and languages have been a lot stronger in us than in our parents and grandparents, for instance, and our generations have been really like the generations who have reclaimed a lot of lost Sámi culture, which means that we are also more willing to criticize and renew as well, and it definitely is a generational thing as well. Like, and it also goes to certain taboos in Sámi society as to who are you allowed to criticize as a young person? Are you allowed to criticize an elder or a renowned academic or a person who was very important in a historical event or all of this? But it does go into the art discussion as well. And for one, I've been really happy to see that happen, because I think that's a really necessary part for the Sámi society to evolve and to also become stronger through that criticism and self-reflection.
Yeah, and I'm also, when you were talking about the hierarchies of like the relationship between the young and the elderly, like who is there to decide what is bad, what is good quality, and what is bad quality, and what are the markings, or what's the word for it? Like what are the what qualifies, like who is deciding what things are the ones that qualify and what not. That is really interesting, especially because the community is then small and there's certain cultural aspects to it. Yeah.
Yes, and definitely one really relevant thing in the Sámi community, and I think indigenous cultures as well, is it's not all too difficult to be the first person to do something. Be it in music or in an event or other types of artistic expression, there's always something you can be the first at doing. And when you become that first person to do that, that gives you a lot of power to define how art about that particular subject is made. And that's not necessarily good either, because just because you're the first doesn't mean you're reaching your full potential, or you're necessarily handling that particular topic well or with nuance, or even that it's your conversation to have even. So yeah, that's a really interesting dynamic to think about.
Yeah, and I'm thinking now this is also from the Institute's point of view, who is trying to bring these conversations, like how do you navigate then this when the tools are yet to be discovered, how to, like, of course you don't know all the ways, but like just in your head, like your ideas, what do you think about how to navigate this type of challenge in the field?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that the key, first of all, is to listen to the field and to the communities. That the starting point for us is always that the expertise in this context comes from within the communities. And then, as usual, when we collaborate on productions or exhibitions, another starting point is always that we work with professionals. And I think, yeah, the validation of or the definition of quality when it comes to art, that's like a huge discussion in itself. But in this context, we rely on expertise coming from within the communities, but also, and that can mean that we look at who is curating or producing. Also that if we work with the production, we also think about the motives behind the project, that who will benefit from it, for example. And I think that's the approach we try to have when navigating this. But for us as well, it's a ongoing learning process.
Yeah,
but I think what's important is that it has to be done in dialogue with these Sámi communities in this case.
Yes, definitely. What kind of, I'm thinking of experiences, but not like detailed experiences, but because now we're getting into this era, especially with, I think that in the Nordics, we are now starting to listen more to our minoritized groups. And I think that Sámi are in that group of like getting more space, not getting more space. You have achieved more space because you have been loud about it. So what are, like, have you noticed any challenges already with that room and that space, what you are given, or the conversations that you've had to have with, like I said, bigger institutions when it comes to Sámi art and the exhibition, or the not showcase, but bringing more Sámi voices out?
It's a good question and a difficult one. I would say in terms of like conventional art spaces, so art museums, the National Museum, for instance, that I worked with, it's not so much about getting more space that's the issue. It's more so when you have that space, when you are present at an event in that space, when you do have your exhibition and all of this. And I've experienced this with both projects that I've been involved in and in exhibitions where I've just visited. These conventional institutes have a tendency to think that if they just give the space, then that's enough. And more often than not, actually, I think every time I've either personally or I've seen a friend experience microaggressions in that space. People have been objectifying or taking photos without permission of our GACTI, and asking like inappropriate questions about our involvement with whichever project is being shown. And this was a big thing that we did a lot of work on with the homecoming exhibition for the National Museum of Finland, which was to have a training for the staff at the National Museum for them to recognize a microaggressive situation towards a Sámi visitor. So we needed to teach them what anti-Sámi racism looks like in order for them to be able to even step in and interrupt a situation like that. And I don't necessarily think that the National Museum had an issue with that training happening, but they most certainly were also taken aback by the need that the Sámi people in that project requested that to happen, because we wanted that space to be safe for us. So yeah, I think institutes and events tend to underestimate the work needed in order to make it a safe experience for artists.
Yeah, and then of course the Sámi have also started to create their own spaces where they exhibit. Do you want to walk us a little bit into, you don't have to go to details, but a little bit into what happens in that kind of for us, by us creation of also those institutions that then bring out the culture. If I've understood correctly, like SIDA and others that are mainly focusing on bringing out the culture for our own community, and the secondary viewer then might be the non-minoritized white people, white people for whatever projects they're doing.
Well, in the case of the Sámi, I think actually even SIDA, even though, like, God bless them, even though SIDA is a Sámi museum, I think even in terms of the Sámi cultural world, it is a bit of a white institution in many ways, and that's because it's state funded. And I think actually the events and spaces that are most important to the Sámi community and that in many ways replace conventional institutions are Sámi festivals that have risen from like grassroots organizations and grassroots efforts that have since grown into larger events, because those festivals that focus on indigenous culture and Sámi culture, those are the only ones that are truly from the beginning have been made by the Sámi for the Sámi. And this is seen in the use of language and the visibility of language, but also the way in which minority Sámi cultures are visible, minority Sámi artists are visible, how the festivals, the events are opened, what sort of discussions take place. Those are the really, really important spaces in Sámi society, in my opinion, at least. And that's not to say we don't need state-funded museums in Sámi communities as well. It's a huge, valuable thing for us to have SIDA, for instance, but it's not the same.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Unnamari? What kind of thoughts do you have on not maybe like this is I was like in my head I was like institutionalizing, but no, it's not about institutionalizing the culture, but institutions and FUBU like connected to each other, or are they ever connected to each other? Do they always kind of go separate ways because of the institution still being a structure, an oppressive structure?
Well, well, I don't know how to open this answer, but I started to think about the artistic freedom and self-determination, because today it's the national cultural authorities that are funding, and the funding sectors who decide on relevance and quality. And when it comes to Sámi art, and not the Sámi community or the Sámi art field, and the Sámi Council works to highlight and change these structures. And we need to center the importance of artistic freedom also from Sámi.
And I'm thinking of this also from like I come from a background where art is always like political, like Petra was a little bit maybe hinting towards there, but I'm looking into also like, is creating always for your own community, like always a political statement, like, and why and why not, if not?
Well, you said it.
Don't quote me.
Well, in terms of like indigenous art, like as a concept even, and I say this meaning that not everyone has to experience it this way, of course, but I think indigenous existence is political. Yeah. Indigenous people are political from birth, because we are not supposed to exist in nation states. And that's why all indigenous art is political. Now, you may not want to be profiled as a political artist because that sounds ugly to financiers and funds. And there's a lot of discussion in indigenous circles as to what kind of art is political in indigenous circles, and if it is, is it political if it's geared towards like the majority people, if it's criticizing the majority people or the state, or is it political if it's criticizing like our internal affairs or whatnot? And I think it's neither here nor there. All of it is political in some way because we are political. So in that sense, I think it's more like interesting to think about like the ways in which people see the politics in art. And I was discussing this with you, Monica, earlier, which was a headline about the phenomenal artist Outi Pieski, who makes incredible pieces, very well known. And there was a headline about her when she had an exhibition, her first solo exhibition in Espoo in Finland, which said that Outi Pieski is a Sámi artist who does not make political art. And I could not comprehend how that headline had been greenlit, because in that very exhibition, Outi has had a piece of art that was about the Datno fishing regulations and the fishing rights disaster that was a scandal between Finland and Norway. Similarly, then she had all of these pieces, these paintings, these sculptures that are about the rematriation of the Latsokahpir, the Hornlue, which is a lost Sámi tradition now being reclaimed, and particularly relates to Christianity and conservatism destroying the matriarchy, the women's position. Yes. And how all of this is not political is beyond me, because of course it is. But what was interesting to me about that headline was that this person did not see those symbols, those signs, and that history behind the pieces of art. Those were visible to a Sámi eye, or an eye of a person who is well versed in Sámi culture and Sámi history. And I think that's a really, really interesting intersection, where a person in the majority people, a Finn or a Swede or a Norwegian, they can enjoy the art, they can enjoy the aesthetics, the colors, the vibes, the names, the materials, and all of that. but it takes that cultural eye to see what the references are and what that piece is actually about. And that to me is just great. It makes me so excited to see her shows whenever she is in Helsinki. But that also in many ways I think is necessary for Indigenous artists to display political art. You have to sort of dress it up in a way that you can also find a space in the majority people's artistic spaces in order for yourself to make a career and make it as an artist. But yeah, that was just a really interesting case to me.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, and please, Iiris, yes. I was about to kind of convert the conversation to what about then the institutes, like, because I know politics are a bit flammable, so how to bring that also in. But before you answer, I just want to encourage all of our audience at the moment, please send us some questions. We have a few minutes before we start asking your questions. And I'd love to also hear from you, audience, about the things that interest you. So please send us questions on the chat, and I'll be reading them then later. But please, Iiris, continue.
I actually think it was Unna-Mari who tried to say
something
something
was
first.
It Unna-Mari? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm
Please,
just having one.
First.
Yeah, thanks. I'm having one small comment because
yes,
this is
please,
very
make it a big one.
Yeah, yeah, this is very interesting subject because this is very often discussed theme in the Sámi society, and there are some artists that require the right to create art only for the sake of the art. And there are also many Sámi artists who don't feel that they have that privilege. And there is one artist, Petra, who is a Sámi poet, painter, and reindeer herder, and he comes from the Swedish side of Sámi, and he has said once that art is the last free voice in Sámi. So the art is an important political tool in Sámi.
It's true.
It's well said. Yes, definitely. But yes, please, Iiris, a little bit of how or your thoughts on navigating then, because yeah, the flammability of politics, but also like now I think that the global what would I call it, like the atmosphere has become more and more wary of identity politics and other kind of ways in which minorities are bringing minoritized communities are bringing their voice out, that is kind of maybe silenced, maybe is a hard word, silenced or otherwise kind of washed or muted.
Yeah, that is a big question. I think that we as institutes who represent Finnish art and culture, and that includes, of course, art from Sápmi as well, we also have to acknowledge that gives us power to choose who we give voice to. But I think we as an institute network, we have a common starting point that we want to take responsibility, and that it's a big work, it's still ongoing, but that we want to advance equity and equality in the field of arts and culture. So I think in that sense, yeah, and we have values and that are defined in our strategies, so that I think in that sense, yeah, even our work can be political.
Yes, I'm very lost, or not lost, but I'm very deep in these conversations of the thoughts of, can art ever be not political? Because I feel like it's always the mirror of the society that it is created in. So it mirrors the creator's point of entrance to the discussion. So it's really interesting then when there might be this thought of one liberating themselves or not maybe not wanting to converse with the political side of it. So it's very interesting.
Honestly, I think if you are in a position where you can make art that you can for sure decide is not political, that means you're privileged. But also, I think for me at least, if I recognize that everything I do is political, then I don't have to worry about it anymore. And I think it's the same thing with art or indigenous languages or whenever an existence is being threatened. If I just like let go of evaluating what part of my life is political and which song I write is political and which isn't, etc., then I think there's a lot of freedom in that, because then I don't have to care and I can just like do it the way I want it done. And then the political aspect of it is how other people receive it and what kind of conversation I can have around it. But I do think like I sometimes get a bit frustrated with the art scene in this like discussion about like politics versus non-politics, because of course there are Finnish artists who are very much not political and who create art for the sake of art or aesthetic art or yeah. And I think that whole debate is just like missing the point of the fact that there are people in this country who don't have the luxury to choose, just as Juva Picha also said. But yeah.
We are getting to our last minutes and I'm still hoping to get some questions, people. I know you have some. I'd actually like to ask for you guys to give us something to take with us. So can you direct us to further conversations or further of this discourse of for us, by us, FUBU culture and art creations? Are there any articles or any books or anything? I know everyone should go and listen to Petra's songs. Absolutely magical music, will make you dance even if you didn't want to. But are there any other paths that I can find or we can find more information about, for example, rematriation, anything? Yeah.
Let me see if I can think of a really good example. Well, for any international people listening, you should definitely, if you can, go see the Venice Biennale. There's going to be a Sámi pavilion at the Nordic House, packed to the brim with just excellence. And if you're in Finland, you can also come and see the Homecoming exhibition in Helsinki. But other than that, I think you just, I think you're very welcome to join a Sámi festival and experience it for yourself.
Any hits or tips, Unnamari?
Well, I think Petra answered very well to this question, but yeah, I agree. You're very welcome to come to our Sámi festivals.
Yeah. About you, Iiris, maybe you have something on your sleeve?
Yeah, I was actually going to invite all of you to follow this series, because I know that we will have more interesting discussions coming up, and also about the rematriation.
Yes.
And about returning stolen objects from museums to the, yeah.
Yes, definitely. Yes, we still have 2 more episodes to come this spring, and some of them have not, well, they have not been the dates yet completely confirmed, but please follow the institutes, and I mean as a plural, the institutes online, because you'll find more information on their Facebook and Instagram. So yes, we have one question already. There is a person wondering, how can we establish broader networks for Sámi culture in southern Finland?
Oh, I have a benchmark for this.
Yes.
I think one of the very good things to do is, if you're an event organizer, for instance, is to contact an existing Sámi event in the north and invite them to do some sort of a showcase down south. Because it's very difficult for the Sámi in southern Finland to build any lasting network since we are very scattered. And most of the people who live here either live here for work or are just in very like, or I'll put it this way, even though we live down here, the community is still up there. So in order to experience the Sámi community, we still go up there instead of staying down here. And that's why it's difficult to establish a network down here. But the solution to that, I think, is to invite Sámi makers and doers from up north, from existing events to show their work down south and see what kind of cooperation is possible to do. And one really good example of this is the Skatmakovat Film Festival that's organized every year in Inari. They oftentimes do a mini Skatmakovat showcase in Helsinki where they show Sámi and indigenous short films and long films in Helsinki. And so they bring their concept down south instead.
Wonderful. I knew about this, but I got excited again about it. Anyone else, anything else, or would you like me to carry on? Yes, there's another question. As a Sámi artist myself, I'm interested of the future of our art world and curational work. Do you think it benefits if we work towards including our art to the major/white art discourse, or should we focus more on indigenous art discourse? If this makes sense, it does, don't laugh. Just wondering how you see this. I have heard many different aspects of this. It's a good question. I think it's a very important question.
It's a really central question. Also, hi Lada, glad you're here. Personally, I think when you become big enough, you can't avoid participating in majority discussion. And you see it with big Sámi artists as well, in all cultural branches in music and in art. That once a Sámi artist is big enough, they also have a majority people's following. So I think in that sense, you don't need to necessarily make an effort to reach that group before you reach your own community. So for me personally, I want to I really enjoy art that's curated for the Sámi first, and then if it reaches and touches majority people, then that's great. But I mean, I can see an argument made for both sides of this.
What do you think, Unnamari?
I think that it can also depend on or about the personal goals. That what do you want? What are your goals that you want to reach?
I was thinking of the previous question, and I actually want to ask from Iiris, because she's been working with the Institute of Oslo, and you or the Institute has quite good connections with Finnish Sámi artists, but also in Norway, no? And how can you give us tips on how to establish this, since you have been able to create such good lasting networks?
Yeah, I think I also have to say that we are also still doing work in order to get more contacts, and we try to get to know more actors from the Sápmi, and that we're doing in order to get more understanding of how we can, if the communities want to move some direction, how we can maybe help and move with them. And that's why we're now also trying to get more contacts and educate ourselves as well, because we think that's needed for us to make our work in a way. But also in Norway, I think that the discussion is a bit has gone a bit, how can I say, forward in comparison to Finland, that at least when you look at the public debate in the media, there is more media coverage about Sámi artists from different perspectives, I would say. but also there are organizations in Norway that I can tips about, like Norwegian Crafts. They work a lot with Dorchi in the way it's the ways of creating craft. Pardon me if I say that definition wrong. And then they work a lot together with people from Sámi, the Sápmi, and also Oka, Office for Contemporary Art from Norway. I know that they've also worked a lot with people from Sápmi.
Wonderful. There is a message. Hello, my name is Vibeke Hegg, and I represent the cultural rucksack, so den kulturelle skolenstokken. I'm sorry if I just completely said that wrong. In the country of Viken, fylkeskommune in Norway, we work with introducing art to children and are interested in Sámi art. Finno has my contact info if any of you are interested in this field. Thank you so much for offering.
Thank you, Vibeke.
Yes, yes. Any more questions? We have for one question. So the fastest eats them all.
Can I say one more thing while we wait
Definitely.
about the majority discourse versus indigenous discourse?
Please.
I think there is always a point to be made, and it has to be said out loud whenever this type of discussion is had, is that it's also the responsibility of majority art institutions and majority artists to not push themselves into marginalized spaces in the name of creating dialogue. Because I think the best way to create reasonable and productive dialogue between these two art scenes, or the minority versus majority art scene, is for the minority art scene to be able to sustain itself and be free and create the type of art and culture that they want, instead of having to worry about how this is going to affect our relationship with the majority art scene. And this is one thing that I think plenty of Finnish institutions have a lot of catching up to do, if I compare to, say, Norway, which isn't, I mean, Finland has a lot of catching up to do in plenty of things, but
yes.
in this case, that supporting Sámi art, Sámi culture, it also means like supporting without expecting anything back. It also means that you are giving up some of your power as an institution in order to like safeguard that particular event or that particular concert or exhibition. I think that just had to be said.
Definitely, and I agree in the most like way that there is, because this is also an issue to other minoritized groups as well, who are maybe invited, but the invitation comes with an expectation, or there's no free lunches type of a suggestion. So definitely this kind of sustainability that you were saying is very, very important, and not interrupting that sustainability or trying to tweak into that sustainability is like one of the key aspects. Definitely. Yeah. Okay, there's no more question. Oh yes, Vlada keeps on keeps me on the edge. Thank you so much. How do you see the use of Sámi term in front of artists, Sámi artists versus artists? A really good question. Do you think she means that? Do you think it differs when it comes to a person who is Sámi, an artist? That's a good question. It's like with the woman or female artists, or that you have to add something. Is it like a legitimation, or what is the need for, and is there a need for?
Well, I started to think the history of the word artist and art in Sámi language, because in the past there is Nilsas Valke, one famous Sámi artist. I say Sámi artist, not artist. But Yeah, he has said that in the past, in Sámi life, there wasn't any artists or art, and everything was just life. And even in the Sámi language, there wasn't words artist and art. They have become on 17th. So those are quite new things in Sámi and in Sámi culture.
And that's very interesting.
Mm.
And I think this is something that can also be seen in events and exhibitions that are meant for, or that are by Sámi for Sámi, because obviously we don't need to tell each other that this person is a Sámi artist. We already know. So it's almost like the prerequisite Sámi artist is always used as an explanation to people who are not Sámi, who are not knowledgeable in our culture, and who need that context in order to understand what it is they're looking at. I think there are positives and negatives to that. There are some cases where it's very needed and very necessary and very helpful, not just for the audience, but also for the artists themselves. But I think it should also be a matter of choice. And I think that should be like a given that a Sámi artist can say, I want to be titled as an artist. I want to be titled as this. I want to be titled as that. And not just presume that the ethnicity is always the first thing to say. And this also relates to a much larger question in the Sámi community that I think Suvi West, the filmmaker, has been very vocal about this, where she is always the Sámi director, Sámi filmmaker. What if she wants to make a film that's not about the Sámi?
Yes.
Or what if it's not about the Sámi in a sense that it doesn't include basic facts about our people?
Yes.
What if it's not obviously Sámi content, etc.? So it's always it's always for the needs of the majority people that term is often used. So yeah.
I think that is a wonderful way of just closing our discussion today. Thank you so much, Petra, Unnamari, and Iiris, for such wise words. Thank you so much for everyone who came. I want to, first of all, thank you so much for our guest speakers. Like, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you for your knowledge and your ideas and your thoughts. And thank you, like I said, thank you for everyone who attended today. Like I said in the beginning, but maybe there's a couple of new ones who need to know, but the next sessions, the dates are not confirmed yet, but please follow the Facebooks and Instagrams and Twitters of the institutions, the Finnish institutes. You'll find more information in there. Thank you for coming. Hope to see you in the next session. Hope to discuss more things. Yeah, anything that you want to know? Okay. So good night, everyone. See you in the next one. Same time, same place, Zoom. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.